What's up guys, this is Treat Yourself. My name is Allie and today I'm going to be filming my July wrap-up video. So before we get into the books, I want to make a disclaimer of how I'm actually in Delaware now and all of my books are in South Carolina. So this is all going to be kind of like a digital copy right here because I have none of these books with me. But this month I've read 12 books, and so let's just get into it. So the first book that I read was Irritable Hearts by Mac McClellan, and this was a nonfiction book about a woman who went to Haiti. She was like a journalist and she developed PTSD, and it's kind of like a romance story about how she like really had to fight through all of her struggles to end up marrying this guy that she met actually in Haiti, but he was like French or something. But I gave this 4 stars. When I'm looking back on it, I probably would have rated it a little bit lower just because, I don't know, she just talked about basically her experiences the whole time and like how this romance really wasn't working out, and it was kind of toxic in my opinion. So I didn't really love it as much as I thought I was going to, but this was also for Bookopoly and I had to pick a romance book, so that's really the only romance that I had on hand. So I ended up giving that 4 stars, but looking back, I would probably give it like 3.5. And then the next book that I read was Last Breath by Karen Slaughter, and you guys know me, I love Karen Slaughter. This was a thriller and I gave this 4 stars as well. It's actually the prequel to The Good Daughter, so that's why I really wanted to read it. I read it as an ebook and it was really good. It's about Charlie, one of the sisters from The Good Daughter, and she kind of just is like trying to stick up for this girl who has like been wrongfully convicted, but then like she finds out at the end that she actually wasn't wrongfully convicted, and she's like a drug dealer or something like that. I don't know. I didn't really like it as much as The Good Daughter, and it was very short, and honestly I don't even remember most of it, so that kind of tells you a lot about how I felt about that book. And the third book that I read was The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris, and this follows Hannibal Lecter. It's a horror book. I gave this 5 stars because it's just one of the classics and I really loved it. I actually watched the movie after I read this book, and so it was really nice to just watch the movie and like actually understand the connections between the movie and book. But it's basically about this guy who's in prison, Hannibal the Cannibal, and he helps FBI find Buffalo Bill, which is this like weird serial killer who's trying to skin people and stuff, just weird stuff. But I highly recommend that book. I also recommend the movie because it was really great. I would read the book first just because it goes into more detail, and I feel like you would be a little bit lost just watching the movie. The movie doesn't really explain some background on Hannibal and like Buffalo Bill, why they are the way they are, but I would definitely recommend that as a horror book, and it's really creepy too. I read Carrie by Stephen King. I gave this 4 stars. This is obviously a horror. If you don't know the story, it's about a girl in high school and she's basically being bullied because she's like has a super religious mother who has not told her about anything basically. So like when she gets her period in the shower, she doesn't know what it is. She thinks she's bleeding to death. She also has telekinesis, so on prom night they're all laughing at her and stuff, and she manages to wreak havoc with her telekinesis powers. So I gave this 4 stars just because I really liked the story and I really liked the movie as well, but it had a lot of like the telekinetic like little phrases in parentheses that didn't really make sense sometimes, but other than that it was a really good story. And I also liked how they used like a lot of the different documents. Like they used articles from like the future about what happened in the town and like different perspectives, so you really got like a full well-rounded story about Carrie and how she was not just demonic and evil. She was actually being bullied and kind of brought issues to light with that as well. The next book that I read was The Child by Fiona Barton, and this was a thriller. I gave it 4 stars. It was really good. I had read The Widow by her, and it kind of follows the same journal as Kate Waters, but it's basically about how baby remains are found like at a construction site and kind of just figuring out who's the baby, and there's like two different people who think that it might be their baby, so it's just very confusing, and I did not see the turn coming at all. Like, I was reading in the car and I saw the turn and I was like, oh my gosh, I did not even see that coming. I don't know, y'all might see it coming because it's kind of obvious looking back, but I really did not see it coming as I was reading it. So that was a really good thriller for me, and it really got me with the twists and turns. Then the next book that I read was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. And I had just watched the movie, so I was really interested in reading the book, and I listened to the audiobook because the author is the one who's actually conveying the story, and I really love like when that happens. That's really the only time I'll listen to audiobooks, is if it's like from the author, just because it is very real and they tell it very well, and you know, they tell it the way they mean it, so it's really good. I gave that 5 stars. It's young adult fiction, but it's basically about this girl named Star, and she is riding in the car with one of her friends, and she is involved in like a police brutality situation where the friend actually is shot by the policeman, and so she kind of just has to end up testifying and like facing a lot of dangerous situations in order to have a voice for the voiceless. So it was really good, very relevant in these times that we're facing right now, and it was just very well told, colloquial, and the author actually like really like talks well as if the characters are talking, so I really liked that about it as well. Next one that I read was The Breakdown by B.A. Paris, and it is a thriller as well. I gave this only 3 stars just because I did not like the way it was written. I hated the protagonist. Like, she was kind of just like a punk, honestly. Not gonna lie. But it's basically about the story of how she goes through these woods late at night to like shortcut to her house, and she sees a woman in her car and doesn't stop to help and kind of feels bad about it. But then the next morning they find out that the woman was brutally murdered, and she was like the last one to see her alive. And then she's forgetting all this stuff and having a lot of troubles with dementia, and her mom had dementia, so she thinks she has early onset dementia, and just all this like crazy stuff happens. The plot of the story really got me. I did not really know about the end or guess it or predict it or anything until kind of the very end, so I did like that about the story. But it was just, I don't know if I don't like B.A. Paris's writing or if that was just not one of her good books, but I just really gave it 3 stars because it was very mediocre to me. And then the next one that I read was a graphic novel. Actually, it was the Life-Changing Manga of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, graphic novel adaptation. I ended up giving this 3 stars as well. I don't like graphic novels, and I feel like it was, I don't know, there was like a story kind of to it, but it was just like, just give me the tips that, you know, you give in the book. It wasn't very straightforward and stuff, and I didn't really like it as much as I thought I would. I was like more so reading it to get like tips on cleaning and tips on tidying up and stuff like that, and there were some, but they weren't very helpful in my opinion, so I gave that one 3 stars. And then I read The Last Flight by Julie Clark, which is another thriller, and I gave this 4 stars. It's basically about these 2 different women who are trying to get away from their home. One has like been caught up in drug dealing and stuff and wants to get away from that life. The other one is caught up in a very abusive domestic violence situation. They kind of switch roles with each other in the airport randomly. And it was very well told. It was pretty complex, but it was kind of predictable. It's kind of your predictable, like, the husband gets what he deserves basically at the end, like karma sets in and stuff like that. So I gave it 4 stars because it was very well written from different perspectives, like the women's perspectives, and it all kind of tied together at the end, which I liked, but at the same time it was a little bit predictable, and some of the scenes were very slow, and I didn't really like that about it. Then the next book that I read was Verity by Colleen Hoover, and it is a romantic thriller. I actually won this from Bookopoly, so I was really excited because I hear a lot of good things about Colleen Hoover, but I don't like romance books, so I thought that a romantic thriller would be just a very perfect one for me. I ended up giving this 4 stars, but looking back, I probably would have given it like 3 or 2, to be honest, because it was just, I don't know. At the very end, I just did not like the end at all, and I can't really tell you about it because it will give it away a lot, but it's basically, I actually talked about it in my book haul, but it's basically about this girl who comes to like ghostwrite for this guy's wife, and like ends up like living with the guy and his wife, and the wife is like paralyzed in bed and stuff, but is she really? No one knows. And then all this stuff, like, is she evil? Blah blah blah. So I really did not like the ending though, because it really just like set everything on its head, and like nothing was as it was expected to be. Next one that I read was Dawn by Elie Wiesel, and it is a fiction, kind of like, it's Night was the first book that he wrote, and it was like non-fiction but also fiction, because he changed like the name of the boy and some of the things that happened, but it was basically based on his life, and I really loved that one. Like, that was five stars all the way. But I ended up giving Dawn 2 stars because it was basically about a guy who, when he got out of like the concentration camps, he literally became a terrorist, like against England, and the whole basis of the story is like he is ordered to like kill this Englishman, and like kind of wrestling with right and wrong, and like his relationship with God, I think. And it was more metaphorical than literal, and there was really no plot actually to it, so I didn't really like the way it was written. I knew what his purpose of writing it was, but I didn't enjoy it like as a book to read, if that makes sense. And so it was more like an internal struggle of Elie Wiesel himself kind of writing this and displacing all of this like struggle with Christianity and trust and right and wrong and life and death, basically, onto this character. And I just did not like how it went. It's a really short book. It's like 80 pages or something like that, but I don't know, I didn't really like it that much. And even though it was well written, there was just no structure to it. And the very last book that I read, it was actually an audiobook, was Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark, and they are some of my favorite podcasters. They had the podcast My Favorite Murder. This was a nonfiction. I gave this 5 stars all the way. I listened to the audiobook, and it was actually them like speaking and stuff, and some of it was like live speaking, so it was super cool to listen to that. I like sped through it in like a day and a half, but it's basically just about their experiences, how the podcast came to be, and I highly recommend this. This is probably my favorite book of the whole month of July. I loved this book, and even though it was an audiobook and it doesn't feel like you're actually reading it, it feels like you're just listening to their podcast. It does have a lot of like personal stuff. It talks about drug addiction and like losing loved ones, so there's a lot of like hard stuff, but you kind of understand why they are the way they are after reading this book or listening to the audiobook. So I would highly recommend that. And that is all of the books I read in July. In August, I'm doing a Jeopardy TBR challenge for my book club, so I'm already have my first prompt of like reading something from your favorite series. So I'm going to be reading Career of Evil by J.K. Rowling with a pen name Robert Galbraith, and I'm 300 pages into that so far, so I'm almost done with that. And also, I am participating in Gabby Reed's Summerween challenge, and I think they have like 5 prompts, so I'm super excited for reading this month. And I will actually be like resuming college towards the end of this month, so I might not read as many books, but I will keep you posted. So I can't wait to see you in my next video.